16. Emily Williams. 36-year-old British Army reservist Natalie Arthurs was in the ladies' room at a bar in Swansea, Wales in November 2022 when a woman she'd never met aggressively confronted her. Later identified as 25-year-old Emily Williams, the stranger began shouting at Natalie, then smashed a glass and attacked the victim with it. The unprovoked assault happened so quickly that Natalie didn't have time to react before Williams slashed and struck her with full force. A witness later described Williams as looking like she was possessed and as if she were using the broken glass to cut meat. The military veteran later described looking in the mirror and seeing flaps of skin hanging from her face and nose. She also recalled seeing blood everywhere. Arthurs told Wales Online that her attacker was overcome with such intense rage that it made her think Williams was trying to kill her. A Good Samaritan discovered Natalie alone in a pool of blood on the bathroom floor and came to her aid. In the meantime, police arrested Williams. Natalie survived, but she still suffers permanent scarring and nerve damage. She'll be required to undergo continued medical procedures for years to come. Following the attack, she felt obligated to quit the reserves because the thought of people mistaking her wounds as battle scars made her uncomfortable. She didn't want to be mistakenly seen as a war hero, and she also left her job as a cleaner due to her injuries. In addition to her physical wounds, Natalie suffers from emotional trauma stemming from the assault. She's no longer an outgoing person and is plagued by anxiety and sleeplessness. Williams denied any wrongdoing and claimed that she didn't remember the attack, but the court was unswayed by her version of events. She was found guilty of grievous bodily harm and received a 5-year prison sentence. The judge also banned her from contacting Natalie or talking about the victim on social media for 10 years. 15. Antonio Tiber. Just 3 days before Christmas in 2022, 25-year-old Antonio Tiber decided to let people on the streets of Birmingham, England know that he wasn't in the holiday spirit by going on a frenzied stabbing spree. He targeted strangers during the drunk 3 a.m. onslaught, killing 35-year-old Christian Debski and injuring 2 other victims who suffered life-altering injuries. Tiber also chased after at least 2 people who managed to escape his wrath unscathed. Tiber plunged his 8-inch blade into Debski's chest with such force that it pierced his pulmonary artery. He collapsed and was found unconscious by emergency responders. Debski was rushed to the hospital, where he died from his injuries despite medical professionals' best efforts to save him. Speaking Romanian in a disturbing Facebook Live video he filmed after the attack, the deranged assailant proudly declared that he was a terrorist and that he would kill anyone who crossed him. Police arrested him in a dramatic takedown, with their guns drawn 15 minutes after he slashed his first victim. In court, psychiatrists testified that Tiber experienced a psychotic episode that was brought on by drinking alcohol and using cocaine for 2 days straight. He allegedly began hearing voices in his head that told him to commit the attacks. Tiber admitted to 1 count of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, cocaine possession, and a weapon charge. He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 30 years before he could become eligible for parole. Following Tiber's conviction, law enforcement released horrifying surveillance footage that was captured during the attack, making it perfectly clear that he's right where he belongs, behind bars. 14. Kio Thomas. An Arizona woman named Kio Thomas went viral in March of 2022 after she crashed her Camaro into a ditch in Maricopa County. Police arrived at the scene to find the partially dressed 20-year-old sitting in the driver's seat. They noticed the smell of alcohol on Thomas's breath and several alcohol containers in her car. The young woman was sweating, her eyes were bloodshot, and her speech was slurred, furthering the officers' suspicions that she was drunk. Thomas allegedly admitted that she drank before driving and fought with cops and firefighters at the scene, while wishing death on their families and saying other terrible things. She pleaded guilty to attempted aggravated assault and was sentenced to 1.5 years of probation. In exchange for her guilty plea, prosecutors dropped several other charges that she had been facing. Less than 2 months after taking the plea deal, Thomas landed in custody yet again. This time she was pulled over for driving the wrong way at 3 a.m. She allegedly showed obvious signs of intoxication, performed poorly during a field sobriety test, and had an open bottle of wine sitting in her car. Thomas refused to provide a breath or blood sample, so the police arrested her on suspicion of driving drunk with plans to obtain a warrant for her blood. In addition to the new DUI charge, she was wanted on a warrant for extreme DUI and was driving on a suspended license. 13. Christian Soto. 4 people were killed and 7 others were injured in a crazed knife attack that took place in Rockford, Illinois in March of 2023. The stabbing spree began when 22-year-old Christian Soto allegedly killed his friend, 23-year-old Jacob Kubaki, who the suspect had been smoking marijuana with. Witnesses reported seeing Soto chasing Kubaki out of a house before stabbing the victim and mowing him down with a pickup truck. Soto is also accused of killing Jacob's 63-year-old mother, Ramona Kubaki. He would later blame his actions on the weed he and Jacob were smoking. He said that the marijuana made him paranoid and suspected that it was laced with another drug. The killer went on to beat and stab 49-year-old postal carrier Jay Larson before repeatedly running him over with a car. According to police, Soto then broke into a house where a trio of teenage girls were watching a movie and attacked them with a baseball bat, claiming his 4th murder victim. He's facing 4 counts of first-degree murder, 7 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and 2 counts of home invasion. If convicted as charged, Soto could face 60 years on each murder charge alone. Following his arrest, Winnebago County State's Attorney Jay Handley said that it's likely that more charges will be added to the case. He also said that Soto could face federal charges for killing a postal worker. Authorities said that the accused killer's motive is unclear. It remains to be seen whether his claim about having a bad reaction to drugs will hold up in court. 12. Douglas Corber Lee. In September of 2021, a deputy in Rowan County, North Carolina caught a man trying to steal thousands of dollars worth of coaxial cable from a cell phone tower. 43-year-old Douglas Corber Lee initially tried claiming that he worked for the company that owned the tower and said he was removing dead wire. When the deputy asked Lee for his ID, the man retrieved a pair of binders from his truck. They were filled with what looked like photocopied pages containing information about the US Constitution and laws, but they failed to help law enforcement identify Lee. After getting nowhere by talking to the suspect, the deputy called the company that owns the tower and learned that nobody was scheduled to work on it that day. The company also said that there had been a sudden outage at the site, indicating the possibility that someone was tampering with the equipment. More deputies came to the scene and tried persuading Lee to provide his ID. He now claimed that he worked for the Postmaster General as a law enforcement officer and told the deputies that he was operating under nautical and maritime law. Lee was charged with felony larceny, misdemeanor injury to personal property, trespassing, impersonating law enforcement, and various marijuana and drug paraphernalia charges. He continued rambling nonsensically about politics and law during his interactions with the deputies, who became concerned about his mental stability. The case was still pending in early 2023 when the judge ordered Lee to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. At around the same time, Lee fired his attorney and decided to represent himself. He resisted the judge's insistence on a mental assessment and said in a Facebook video that the court had zero chance of convicting him. Later that year, Lee was arrested in connection with a string of cable thefts throughout Yadkin County. He was charged with 2 counts of felony larceny and 2 counts of felony injuring property to obtain non-ferrous metals. Lee also faces charges in other counties. Records show that he was arrested in Fayetteville in July 2023 for resisting an officer and being intoxicated and disruptive. He's also suspected of additional cable thefts. As of early 2024, Lee remains behind bars at the Iredell County Detention Center with bail set at $30,000. 11. Paul Edmonson. British boxing coach and YouTuber Paul Edmonson founded a popular charity called Men's Mental Health Warriors, which offers support through videos and weekly meetings on social media. He was inspired to start the organization after he hit rock bottom and sought help for himself. MMH Warriors became overwhelmingly popular, perhaps more so than Edmonson had expected. He welcomed the challenges of being in such high demand and even created a women's group in 2022. But Edmondson's reputation took a major blow in 2023 when he was accused of brutally assaulting his girlfriend twice throughout their brief relationship. During the first attack in March, Edmondson allegedly broke the victim's sternum. In the second attack, which occurred 7 months later, he shoved the woman down a flight of stairs, hurled her belongings at her, and attacked her car with an axe as she sought refuge inside the vehicle. He smashed the front windshield and the driver's side window during his rampage, causing the victim to be covered in glass shards. Edmonson was arrested following the second attack. In court, the defense argued that he suffers from a personality disorder and something called pathological jealousy. In March of 2024, he was convicted of assault causing actual bodily harm, battery, criminal damage, and weapon-related charge for the axe. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison and was banned from contacting or going near the victim for at least 3 years. 10. Melissa Johnson Bird. Early one morning in February 2024, San Antonio police responded to a reported shooting at a local residence. They arrived to find 61-year-old Melissa Johnson Bird with blood on herself and a cell phone in her hand. She allegedly told the cops to get away because she didn't believe they were real officers and demanded to talk to the media. Upon entering the home, officers found Melissa's husband, 69-year-old Richard Bird Evans, dead with a gunshot wound to the back of his head. There were several guns in the home, along with a letter Melissa had written about her suspicions that her husband was being tracked. According to an arrest report, she'd also asked a neighbor to call the FBI and said that she believed there was an electric fence surrounding her property. Melissa told the responding deputies that she and Richard had stayed up all night, worrying that someone would hack their bank accounts and burglarize their home. Given her strange behavior, the cops suspected that she might be in the throes of a mental crisis, but she was coherent enough not to answer any questions about her husband's death and to ask for an attorney. She was booked into the Bexar County Jail on a murder charge and remains held on $200,000 bond while awaiting her next court hearing. 9. Brandon Wagshall. 26-year-old Brandon Wagshall of Norwalk, Connecticut, has a history of disturbing behavior dating at least as far back as 2008, when he began showing an alarming interest in mass shootings. In 2019, police seized an arsenal of guns from his home and accused him of trying to illegally obtain parts to build a high-powered rifle. Wagshall was out on bail amid his pending case when he allegedly beat his father with a 2-foot metal pipe in early 2020. Police arrived at the home to find the victim suffering from a large head gash, and Wagshall's bail was revoked. He spent the next year and a half in custody before pleading guilty to second-degree assault and illegal possession of high-capacity magazines in 2021. The judge sentenced Wagshall to 4 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation, and he was also banned from owning guns due to his criminal convictions. Wagshall was a free man again by October 2023, but he was still on probation when he was seen walking down the street in a gas mask and acting disoriented. Concerned for his mental state, police took him to a psychiatric emergency room where he was hospitalized for several weeks. According to court documents, Wagshall is plagued by delusions about being in the military. These fantasies continued during his time at the hospital, and they seem to have continued after his release. At around 9 a.m. one morning in December 2023, he was seen wearing camouflage and carrying what looked like an AK-47. It was actually an airsoft gun, but Wagshall's behavior continued to concern the police. They found him lying on his stomach near a bike path with the weapon next to him. Wagshall was arrested on a handful of new charges, including illegal use of a facsimile firearm, carrying a dangerous weapon, and second-degree breach of peace. During a subsequent court hearing, the judge raised his bail from $500,000 to $1 million and ordered him to undergo a new battery of psychological tests to determine what to do about his continued problematic behavior. 8. Samuel Pyrro. On a Sunday afternoon in January 2024, a Nebraska man went on a public rampage while driving a Bobcat skid loader in the city of Lincoln. 36-year-old Samuel Pyrro allegedly unloaded the vehicle from a trailer at a gas station and proceeded to ram it into a homeless shelter donation box. He went on to ram at least 8 vehicles, including a police cruiser. He's also accused of damaging an apartment complex sign, the front of a liquor store, 2 Home Depot sheds, and an ATM outside a credit union. According to police, Pyrro drove the skid loader straight into a cop car as the first responding officer pulled up to the scene. Police took him into custody at gunpoint, and now he's facing 7 charges, including assault and criminal mischief. Court documents state that officers suspected Pyrro of being under the influence of drugs due to his erratic behavior and nonsensical statements. he caused an estimated $114,000 worth of damages and could face up to 80 years in prison if convicted as charged. Pyrro pleaded not guilty to the charges and is currently serving a 6-month jail sentence for an unrelated domestic violence incident that occurred in October of 2023. 7. Louis Sacko. While working as a supervisor at a call center in South Morang, Australia, 23-year-old Celeste Mano showed compassion to a worker named Louis Sacko when the job didn't work out for him. She was just trying to be nice when she walked the 35-year-old to his car on his last day and wished him luck. But Sacko took it the wrong way and kissed Celeste on the cheek. Sacko couldn't get it through his head that there was no chance of a romantic future between him and Celeste. He began to pursue her relentlessly, and his behavior eventually escalated to full-blown stalking. For an entire year, Sacko constantly messaged the young woman, who became so worried about his behavior that she reported him to law enforcement at least twice. Authorities charged Sacko with stalking and harassment and issued a stay-away order. But like any true psychopath, he wasn't going to let a piece of paper or a few criminal charges get in the way of his mission. In the meantime, Celeste tried to live as normal of a life as possible. In 2020, she met and began dating Chris Ridsdale, and the couple had the unfortunate luck of Sacko seeing them while they walked hand in hand one day. Sacko was further enraged when the couple decided to make their relationship Facebook official. Early one morning, while Celeste was asleep in her bed, her deranged stalker smashed through her bedroom window and stabbed her to death. Shortly after the crime, Sacko drove to a police station and turned himself in. He pleaded not guilty, despite his initial willingness to confess, and the case dragged on for years as he continuously challenged the charges. Sacko claimed that his poor mental health absolved him of any responsibility in Celeste's murder. In early 2023, a psychiatrist deemed him unfit to stand trial and predicted that he wouldn't be restored to competency anytime within the next year. Finally, in April of that year, Sacko pleaded guilty to murder, but he's done everything in his power to continue stalling the case. In January 2024, he managed to delay his sentencing date by asking the court for a new mental health evaluation. The judge rescheduled the sentencing hearing for October 2024. Whether or not Sacko succeeds with whatever other stall tactics he has up his sleeve remains to be seen. 6. Tane Stallings Brown. In January 2024, a rampaging motorist went on a 90-minute crime spree in St. George's County, Maryland, and ended in Baltimore. Identified by police as 31-year-old Tane Stallings Brown, the enraged driver is accused of beginning her campaign of violence during the early evening by striking a pedestrian on a sidewalk in a seemingly deliberate manner. She allegedly struck 2 more victims around 15 minutes later, then exited the vehicle and stabbed one of them, a teenage girl. According to law enforcement, the suspect struck a male victim a short while later, then turned her car around and ran over him a second time. About an hour after that, officers responded to a report about a taxi driver being stabbed by someone matching Stallings Brown's description. Altogether, Stallings Brown stands accused of 3 hit-and-runs and 2 stabbings. Luckily though, all the victims survived, including some who were rushed to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. After identifying Stallings Brown as the suspect, police tracked her to Baltimore and arrested her during a traffic stop. She was charged with multiple crimes, including attempted first-degree murder. St. George's County Police Chief Malik Aziz said that in more than 30 years of working in law enforcement, he'd never seen a suspect so determined to inflict harm on people. He told Fox 5 Baltimore that Stallings Brown was being uncooperative and that her motive for the alleged crimes is unclear. The suspect's mother, Tanya Stallings, told the Washington Post that her daughter suffers from mental health issues including schizophrenia. She said that Tanya had sought professional help several times in the weeks leading up to her arrest. Tanya also explained that Tanya's mental health worsened after her partner and the father of her young son passed away. She told the Post that she felt apologetic towards the victims and that she hoped the arrest would lead to her daughter getting the help she needs. 5. Shane James Jr. 34-year-old Shane James Jr. allegedly killed 6 people and injured several others during a shooting spree in Austin, Texas in December of 2023. The violence began shortly before 11 a.m. when school police officer Val Barnes was struck in the leg by a bullet. He survived his injuries after driving himself to the hospital. About an hour later, police responded to a call about a man and a woman who were fatally gunned down elsewhere in the city. Disturbing video footage appeared to show James exiting a vehicle and shooting the pair, who were identified as 32-year-old Emmanuel Pop Bar and 24-year-old Sabrina Rahman. In the video, Rahman could be seen trying to run away from the shooter as he chased after her. Shortly before 5 p.m., a man was struck by a bullet while riding his bike. He survived with non-life-threatening injuries. After that, the shooter exchanged gunfire with a cop who was responding to the scene of a reported burglary in progress. The 911 caller reported seeing a man kicking in the front door of his home while his wife and daughter were inside. When police arrived, the suspect ran into the backyard and shot an officer multiple times. The officer suffered non-life-threatening injuries, and the gunman fled the scene in a stolen car. Just a few minutes later, the driver lost control, veered into oncoming traffic, and struck another vehicle. James climbed out of the car and surrendered without further incident. In the meantime, police found 2 more dead victims inside the home where they'd exchanged gunfire with the suspect. During a welfare check at the accused gunman's home, the cops found Shane's parents dead with gunshot wounds to the head. James is being held without bond at the Travis County Jail on 4 counts of capital murder and 2 counts of aggravated assault against a public servant. There are still a lot of unanswered questions surrounding the case, including the shooter's motive and what he was doing during a 6-hour gap between shootings. At the time of his arrest, James was wanted on 3 warrants out of Bexar County. He has a lengthy criminal history, but seems to have avoided any major time behind bars thus far. In 2022, James was accused of assaulting several family members and was bailed out by a non-profit called the Texas Organizing Project. After being released from jail, he cut off his ankle monitor and went on the run. In addition to James's repeated arrests, police have responded to incidents at the defendant's home at least 14 times between 2016 and the shootings in 2023. According to records, 7 of the calls were for disturbances, mental health concerns, and welfare checks. During one incident in August 2023, police decided against taking James into custody on his outstanding warrants to avoid a violent confrontation. James was allegedly refusing to leave his bedroom, so the cops told his dad to call them when he finally came out. Given the nature of the charges he's currently facing, it's unlikely that the defendant will re-enter the free world anytime soon, if ever. But many people are wondering why it came down to a mass shooting spree for him to finally get locked up, especially when so many red flags were present ahead of time. 4. James Douglas Drayton. Deputies in Spartanburg County, South Carolina walked in on a horror scene at an in-man home in October 2022 when they found an entire household of 5 adults riddled with gunshot wounds. Authorities named the victims as 37-year-old Thomas Ellis Anderson, 32-year-old Adam Daniel Morley, 59-year-old Mark Allen Hewitt, 19-year-old Roman Christian Megial Rocha, and 49-year-old James Derek Baldwin. The victims were found in separate rooms and had been dead for an estimated 10 hours by the time police were called to the scene. Investigators narrowed their sights on a 24-year-old suspect named James Douglas Drayton, who lived at the home for around 2 weeks and was nowhere to be found. He was spotted more than 100 miles away the next morning in Hephzibah, Georgia, where he led police on a high-speed chase in a stolen vehicle. The pursuit reached speeds of over 80 miles per hour before Drayton crashed the car and attempted to flee on foot. Luckily though, he was swiftly taken into custody. Spartanburg deputies traveled to Georgia to interview him as soon as they found out he'd been arrested. Drayton admitted to committing the murders, telling detectives he was on a 4-day methamphetamine binge and had started hearing voices. During his time in Georgia, he'd robbed a convenience store at gunpoint. He pleaded guilty to armed robbery and a gun charge and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. As of early 2023, Drayton had yet to be indicted on the quintuple homicide charges out of South Carolina, leaving the current status of the case unclear. 3. Jonathan Gregory Kubaki. While responding to a domestic violence call at a residence in Daleville, Ohio in October 2023, Jefferson County deputies found the front door blocked with wood and other debris. They removed the obstructing materials and forced their way inside. Once inside, they were met by a woman who was reportedly covered head to toe in bruises, scratches, and a large knot on her head. She said that she and her sister were having a girls' day, while her boyfriend, 41-year-old Jonathan Gregory Kubaki, spent the day elsewhere. When Kubaki returned home drunk out of his mind, he allegedly started yelling at the woman, and his behavior escalated from there. Kubaki's girlfriend said she went to bed in an attempt to de-escalate the situation, but was woken up for talking in her sleep, something that apparently annoyed Kubaki. After trying to fall asleep on the floor, the woman went into her bathroom to play a game on her phone, but Kubaki allegedly followed her in there and started beating her up. He was accused of breaking his girlfriend's phone, slamming her onto the floor, and bashing her head against the tub. The irrationally enraged man proceeded to destroy the home, according to a police report. Drawers got ripped out of their cabinets and thrown. A cable box was yanked out of the wall, knives got thrown, and a TV fell on the victim. When her dog tried to protect her, Kubaki allegedly beat the dog. The woman threw herself over the dog to protect him, then began picking up the mess so he wouldn't step on any of the debris and get hurt. But Kubaki wasn't done, according to the victim, who told the cops that he charged at her while she was cleaning the house. She happened to have a knife in her hand, and Kubaki ended up cutting his throat on the blade. The woman's sister entered the house to try getting her and the dog out of there, but was screamed at by Kubaki, who allegedly exposed himself to her and threw things at her. According to a police report, he was covered in blood and was fading in and out of awareness by the time deputies arrived due to his level of intoxication. He admitted that he'd been drinking all weekend and was taken to the hospital for treatment of his neck wound before being booked on a domestic violence charge. 2. Sheree Howard. 39-year-old Sheree Howard of St. Petersburg, Florida was a successful doctor who ran her own osteopathic practice. She shared a home with her older sister, 54-year-old Sheree Lynn Howard, who worked as a realtor. The women had grown extremely close since the loss of their parents, with Sheree acting as a mother figure to Sheree. Nobody would have ever imagined the day when Sheree dialed 911 and confessed to killing her sister, but that's what happened in April 2023. Police arrived at the home to find Sheree strangled to death. During their investigation, they learned that Sheree's behavior had become increasingly erratic in the months leading up to the homicide. Less than a month earlier, she had dialed 911 and reported that she believed there was a man in her house who'd tied her up. Sheree was taken to a psychiatric emergency room, and Sheree told emergency responders about her sister's recent episodes of unusual behavior. Shortly before the murder, Sheree had been diagnosed with psychotic-like symptoms and had been prescribed medication. But she wasn't taking her meds, and her increasingly paranoid thoughts caused her to do the unthinkable. Relatives of the sisters were shocked to learn of the tragedy, especially considering how close the two were. They knew Sheree would have never committed such a horrifying act in her right mind, and were hoping that the court would rule in favor of an insanity plea. During Sheree's trial, state mental health expert Dr. Mark Ruiz testified that she suffers from schizophrenia and that she was incapable of distinguishing right from wrong when she killed Sheree. More specifically, Ruiz said that Sheree appears to suffer from fairly persistent paranoid or persecutory delusional beliefs related to witchcraft or spiritual warfare. Sheree was also extremely sleep-deprived at the time of the murder, which most likely impacted her mental state. In a rare case of the defense and prosecution agreeing in a criminal case, experts from both sides of the case testified that Sheree was a danger to herself and others, especially without proper medical treatment. Ruiz commented on the particularly striking contrast between Sheree's history as a highly educated professional and the changes she experienced when her symptoms took over. He also told the court that Sheree had expressed shock at her actions during her mental evaluation. Sheree could be seen crying in the courtroom during discussions about Sheree's death. While awaiting trial, she began taking medication again and her condition improved, but not to the point where experts thought she was doing exceptionally well. After considering the general consensus between the prosecution and the defense, the judge found Sheree not guilty by reason of insanity during a bench trial in December 2023. While she won't serve any prison time, she has been ordered to undergo treatment at a state hospital, where she'll remain until or unless she no longer poses a danger to herself or others. In a somber conclusion to a tragic case that left an entire family devastated, the judge said he was sorry for the pain that everyone was going through. And now for number 1, But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Bryce Holiday. In September 2017, 911 dispatchers in Lawrence, Kansas received a call from 20-year-old Stephen A. Drake III, who openly admitted that he had just shot another man in the head at close range and with witnesses present. Officers arrived at the young man's home to find 26-year-old Bryce Holiday dead at the front door. Drake, his girlfriend, his roommate, and a family friend told the police that Holiday had shown up at the residence when Jake and his girlfriend were out of the house. His roommate let Holiday inside, but regretted it almost instantly when he noticed that the man seemed like he was tweaking. Holiday allegedly began rummaging through items at the home, prompting the roommate to call Drake. Upon arriving home with his girlfriend, Drake yelled at Holiday to leave, but he was supposedly so high that he wasn't comprehending anything that was being said. Witnesses also described seeing Holiday digging his fingernails into his face, scratching himself, and occasionally nodding off, only to wake back up and resume his bizarre behavior. A family friend who Drake considers to be a stepmother figure arrived at the home next. She made Holiday empty his pockets and tried forcing him to leave, but he refused. All 4 people in the house worked together to try pushing Holiday out the door, but he pushed back and threw punches, striking Drake's girlfriend in the face. Even after being pepper sprayed, Holiday continued resisting the group's efforts to force him outside. Feeling like he had no other choice, Drake threatened Holiday with a gun, and when that wasn't enough to get his point across, he pulled the trigger. The bullet struck Holiday from less than a foot away, killing him at the scene. In Drake's eyes, he had done what was necessary to restore order and safety to his home. But the police had a lot of questions, including why he didn't call them in the first place. The altercation lasted nearly an hour, which would have been plenty of time for law enforcement to respond to the scene. Drake said that his phone was dead and that he doesn't call the cops. He also had several priors and pending charges, which didn't exactly paint him in a favorable light. He was initially arrested on suspicion of involuntary manslaughter, but the charge was eventually upgraded to first-degree murder. In 2022, a jury found Drake guilty of voluntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 8 years and 4 months in prison as a result. During his sentencing hearing, he said that the 5 years since the shooting had been the worst of his life. Drake said that he never wanted to hurt Holiday and that he didn't want Holiday to hurt him or his family. The outcome of the case disappointed Holiday's family, leading to tensions between parties that erupted into a shouting match outside the courtroom. Records show that Drake's earliest possible release date is in 2026.
Number 10. Hungry Girlfriend. A woman from Morocco living in the United Arab Emirates has confessed to a rather horrifying crime. She admitted that not only did she butcher her boyfriend, but she ground up his remains and fed them to a group of construction workers. It was a group of Pakistani workers who had the unfortunate pleasure of eating this woman's dead boyfriend. She cooked a huge meal of machbous, a traditional dish made in the Gulf with rice and meat. If you've ever had biryani, it's kind of similar to that. According to investigators in Abu Dhabi, she killed her boyfriend of 7 years after he confessed that he wanted to end things and marry a different woman. She got so mad that she attacked him, beat him to death, and then chopped him up in little pieces. And she almost got away with it too. The only reason she got caught was that the dead guy's brother showed up to the house looking for his missing brother. That was when he discovered a single tooth sitting in the bottom of a kitchen blender. Apparently, she hadn't cleaned up after herself very well. The brother took the tooth to the authorities, with a DNA test confirming that it belonged to the missing man. When the police finally took this woman in, she admitted everything. She said that after she fed her dead boyfriend's remains to the construction workers, she threw the rest of the dish in an alley to feed some neighborhood dogs. Number 9. The Pusher. Andrea Zambaroni was the head chef at the Caprani Dolce in New York before he was discovered wrapped up in a greasy motel, dead. He was also the third man found deceased in a Queens motel after hanging out with a woman named Angelina Barini. The first victim was discovered at the Airway Inn on July 4th, dead from a drug overdose. Police didn't think much of it until a second victim appeared the week after, on July 11th, dead at the Crown Motor Inn, also from a drug overdose. And by the time Andrea Zambaroni was discovered stuffed in a garbage can with one foot sticking out at the Camway Lodge, just blocks from his home, police knew they had a problem. As it turned out, the police were not only victims of drug overdoses, They were victims of a serial robber prostitute and her pimp. Angelina Barini was spotted on surveillance footage bringing a garbage can back to the room where Zamperoni was found, the same one he was stuffed into. When the police questioned her, she blamed the death on her pimp, saying it was him that made her do it. With a bit more investigating, cops learned that Angelina was providing a type of liquid ecstasy to men who paid for her services. But this liquid ecstasy turned out to be deadly, killing all the men she gave it to. After these men were dead, Angelina robbed them and then ran away. She has since been charged with conspiracy to distribute fentanyl, but not actually murder. But seeing as she had already 25 prior arrests since 2001, she's most likely going to get a pretty heavy sentence. Number 8. Party Mom. A mom from the Bay Area has been charged with something extremely bizarre. In fact, it's so bizarre that you're probably not even going to believe it. Her name is Shannon O'Connor, 47 years old. According to charges filed by the Santa Clara County District's Attorney's Office, she's gotten in trouble for hosting secret teenage parties involving alcohol and adult activities. Prosecutors are saying that this woman, almost 50 years old, would buy alcohol for her son and his teenage friends and lure them to her house to get drunk. And while this is pretty bad parenting in and of itself, it gets even weirder. Shannon discouraged the teens from telling anyone else about the parties, especially their parents. She also refused to call for help when one of the teens got so drunk that they threw up on themselves and passed out. And now for the really sick stuff. Shannon encouraged the teenagers to get busy with one another, often under non-consensual circumstances, and often while she watched and maybe even participated a little. In other words, and to be completely frank, she lured teenagers to her house and got them wasted so that she could convince them to have weird sex parties. This sounds like the plot of a really bad movie, but it's 100% true. Shannon is being charged with 39 criminal counts, including sexual assault, felony child abuse, and providing alcohol to minors. She may not have killed anyone, but this woman proved to be wildly dangerous in a completely different way. Number 7. Vindictive and violent. A woman known only as Fung is one of the most dangerous and frightening people on the planet. The reason for this is simple. While her 52-year-old boyfriend was asleep, she snuck into his bed and cut off his manhood. Yikes. Oh yes, this is a real thing that actually happened. The man was taken to the hospital for emergency treatment, at which point the doctors told him that he would never be able to perform in the bedroom ever again. Double yikes. They didn't even have an opportunity to reattach his pieces because his girlfriend flushed the chunk that she'd cut off down the toilet. Triple yikes. You're probably wondering what could motivate somebody to do something so horrible. Well, Fung thought that he was cheating. In revenge, consumed by anger that her boyfriend would portray her like that, she cut off his junk while he was sleeping. And not only that, she sawed it off, which must have been extremely gruesome. He lost about 20% of the organ. The reason he didn't wake up while the sawing was going on is because she had likely poisoned his food to make him pass out. So when he woke up finally in the middle of the night, his bed was soaked in blood. As for Fung, she has since been charged with aggravated assault. But because she didn't intend to kill, she won't actually spend that much time locked up. How much jail time should this lady get? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. And if you're liking the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe button if you haven't already. Number 6. Stabby. Dennehy was born in St. Albans, Hertfordshire, in the UK. She was raised by her parents, her dad, a security guard, and her mother, a grocery worker. Dennehy began running away from home when she was just 15 years old and continued to do so before she turned 16 and had the legal right to choose where to live. Her parents had hoped that their daughter would become a lawyer, not a psycho killer. At 31 years old, Joanna Dennehy confessed to stabbing 3 men in the chest and dumping their bodies in ditches. Dennehy went on a killing spree. Her unfortunate victims were her boyfriend, Kevin Lee, 48, his friend, Lukas Slabazuski, 31, and housemate, John Chapman, 56. She somehow convinced 2 other men to help her cover up these crimes. She had them help her dress one of the victims up in a black sequin dress and left him in a ditch. She also stabbed 2 random people, Robin Bereza and John Rogers, who were simply walking their dogs down the street. Luckily, both men survived the attack. She was on the run for 2 days before apprehended by police. In an interview, she claimed she wanted to kill 9 men in total. She wanted to be remembered like Bonnie and Clyde. Dennehy was diagnosed with antisocial psychopathic disorders, as well as borderline personality disorders. You think? After her arrest, she was also diagnosed with paraphilia sadomasochism, which means she gets sexual excitement from pain and humiliation. She's clearly a dangerous woman who kills for her own self-pleasure. She will be behind bars for the rest of her life. Number 5. Hot revenge. It was 2007, and a woman was lying asleep in her apartment with her 2 small children. She was rudely awoken by a pan of hot cooking oil being poured onto her face. According to the prosecutors in the case, it was Sandra St. John who threw the hot cooking oil. Sandra had seen the other woman as a rival. Why? Because the man that she was dating, and whose child she had given birth to, also happened to have a child with this other woman. Sandra was jealous of the other woman and her child because they were spending too much time with the father of her own child. And if that sounded like a lot to follow, it absolutely is. To take care of this issue, Sandra thought it was a good idea to dump hot oil on the poor woman's face. When she appeared before a court, Assistant District Attorney Richard B. Morse called her a menace to society. Then, in her own defense, Sandra said that she didn't even do it. She said that the other woman did it to herself to frame her. But this defense didn't slide, and Sandra was given 16 years in prison for her brazen midnight attack. She was charged with armed burglary, mayhem, battery with a deadly weapon, and endangerment of a child. Number 4. Fighting a lion. A woman in California has proved to be somebody you absolutely don't want to mess with. Her child was playing inside of her home in Calabasas in the mountains just west of Los Angeles when a mountain lion came out of nowhere and pounced on the kid. The lion snatched up the child in its jaws and dragged him across the front lawn. It was devastating, and most people would have panicked and not known what to do. But not this dangerous mom. She attacked the lion with her bare hands and beat the hell out of it. Chalk it up to parental instinct, fight or flight, or whatever you want. But this woman is a wrecking ball. Even though her son suffered injuries to his head and torso, he made it to the hospital in Los Angeles in stable condition because his mom literally fought a mountain lion. She grabbed the thing by its face and punched it into next week. This is not the kind of woman you want to get in an argument with. Sadly for the lion, it was later discovered by wildlife officials and put down. The authorities said it was just a young lion, still learning how to hunt. This is why it went after the kid, because it hadn't learned any better yet. So while this woman isn't exactly a danger to society, she's definitely a danger to wildlife that tries to snack on kids. Number 3. Miranda Barber. Miranda Barber may just be the most dangerous woman in the history of the United States of America. If you haven't heard of her, get ready to be surprised. At just 19 years old, she confessed to being one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. However, police in Pennsylvania and the FBI are still trying to work out just how many of her murders are real and how many of them she made up to get attention. First of all, prosecutors in Pennsylvania are seeking the death penalty against Miranda and her husband for the murder of Troy LaFerrera, the guy who answered a Craigslist ad to exchange money for services of the adult variety. When Troy showed up to the meeting spot, Miranda and her husband stabbed him to death. At the time, the couple had been together only for 3 weeks. They had just moved to the area from North Carolina. Police described it as a thrill killing, with the husband hiding in the back of the SUV with a cord around the victim's neck, and Miranda doing the actual stabbing from the front seat. The police were quick to track down the couple and arrest them, and once they had Miranda behind bars, she began confessing to dozens of murders throughout all of the United States. She also claimed that she joined a satanic cult in Alaska when she was just 13, and that was when the killing actually started. However, the police haven't been able to confirm any of her confessed killings. She says she killed over 22 people, but the FBI is still searching for the remains. It could be the real deal, a teenage girl who went on a mad killing spree for 6 years, or it could all just be a delusional fantasy. Number 2. Robbing in the Bronx. A crazy woman from the Bronx had gotten into some serious trouble for robbing a family dollar store and trying to stab the security guard to death with a screwdriver. It's hard to say if this woman is crazy, dangerous, or a little bit of both. According to the officials, the incident happened on a Sunday night on Ogden Avenue. The woman placed several items in a plastic bag and then tried to leave the store without paying. It was a classic dollar store robbery. But when the security officer tried to stop her, she pulled out a screwdriver and went straight for his throat. Luckily, the security guard managed to evade the attack and distance himself from the woman. After all, getting stabbed over a robbery at a dollar store is not really worth it. The woman then fled the scene and, believe it or not, got away clean. The police have been unable to track her down, and so there is currently a maniac on the loose in the Bronx with a screwdriver that is not afraid to use it. And number 1, Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos is without a doubt one of the most terrifying serial killers that ever stalked the back roads of America. Anyone who's seen the movie Monster with Charlize Theron will recognize Aileen as a demented lunatic. In 2002, she was executed in the state of Florida after killing 7 men that she picked up while working the highways as a prostitute between 1989 and 1990. She was the 10th woman at the time to ever receive the death penalty in the United States since it was reinstated in 1976. But Aileen's story is one of tragedy. She began working as a prostitute at the young age of just 11. She would exchange sexual favors at the elementary school with other students for things like cigarettes and candies. Her father hanged himself in a prison cell when she was only 13 years old, and by that point, her mother had already abandoned her. She was living with her grandmother, who then died of liver failure. This left her alone with her grandfather, who abused her and beat her for years until he finally dumped her in the woods and abandoned her at the age of just 15. As you can probably tell, this woman was not going to have an easy life. After an extremely difficult existence, consumed by anger at the world, she began killing. While working the highways as a prostitute, she just kind of snapped. Every man who picked her up, she shot or killed one way or the other, stripped them naked, and then robbed them. She went on and on like this, butchering 7 men in total, until the police eventually caught her. Number 10. The Karate Killer. In Mumbai, a 15-year-old girl killed her mother using a karate belt and tried to make it look like a hanging. It happened in late July, following an argument that the teen got into with her mother over her studies. The daughter had just completed some exams at school, and her mom was urging her to continue studying hard and to take a new medical course. But the girl was sick of being bossed around and had an explosive overreaction. She pushed her mother to the floor, which somehow spurred the girl into an even bigger fit of rage. She then grabbed the karate belt, wrapped it around her injured mother's throat, dragged her onto the bed, and strangled her to death. At this point, the girl was desperate and didn't know what to do. She sent a message from her mom's phone to her uncle, claiming that her mom had locked herself in the bedroom and was being very weird. She was trying to pass it off like her mother had strangled herself to death. But of course, an autopsy quickly figured out what really happened, and the girl was arrested. All of this horror just because a mother wanted her daughter to study medicine. Number 9. Jessica Camilleri. Jessica Camilleri, a seemingly normal woman from Sydney, Australia, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for a crime described as extraordinarily vicious and brutal. Jessica, afraid that her mother was going to send her to a mental institution, killed the woman that gave birth to her and then cut off her head. Jessica was only 27 years old when she committed this terrible murder. She may have been an adult, but she was still an incredibly evil daughter, especially since her mother, Rita Camilleri, was described as having a heart of gold. Rita's friends said she always put others before herself, including her murderous daughter. Jessica's charge was reduced down to manslaughter after her lawyers argued that she was impaired at the time of the killing by a whole slew of different mental disorders. These include, but are not limited to, autism spectrum disorder, intermittent explosive disorder, and an intellectual disability. But if you really want to know what happened that day, be prepared for some serious violence. According to what was said in court, the crime involved 7 separate knives, 4 of them broken during Jessica's insane stabbing spree, which the judge called entirely spontaneous. The mutilation, meaning the removal of the head, may have been inspired by Jessica's morbid fascination with horror movies. Number 8. The Twilight Killer. Liz Edwards begged her daughter, who was just 14 years old, to dump her evil boyfriend before he ruined her life forever. Liz could clearly see that there was something wrong with Lucas Markham, the boy who had captured Kim Edwards' attention. But being just a young girl, Kim never heeded her mother's advice. In fact, she went fully over to the dark side. Kim and Lucas crept up to where her mother slept one night and stabbed the 49-year-old woman to death. To make things even more horrific, and to give you nightmares tonight when you try to sleep, they then snuck into Kim's sister's room. Together, the demented teenagers stabbed 13-year-old Katie Edwards to death in her bed. The couple were dubbed the Twilight Killers by media in the UK because after they finished murdering their victims, they ate ice cream and sat down to watch the Twilight movies. They are now the youngest couple ever convicted of a double murder in the United Kingdom. They were handed down 17-year sentences each. But really, is 17 years enough to cleanse an evil soul? Number 7. Isabella Guzman. Isabella Guzman was only 18 years old when she stabbed her mom to death in Aurora, Colorado. In 2013, Isabella pleaded not guilty because she was insane. The plea was accepted, and Isabella was sent to the Colorado Mental Health Institute in Pueblo, but in 2020, she began a very serious effort to get herself released. This is a pretty prickly issue. It's true that Isabella is on medication and that her sanity has been somewhat restored through the last 7 years at the Mental Health Institute. But at the same time, people are worried that someone capable of something so evil could be released back onto the streets just because they're in a better mental state than they were before. The truth of the matter here is that Isabella Guzman stabbed her mother, Yoon Hee Moy, 79 times in the face and neck. 79 times. Her stepfather found Isabella standing over the dead and bloody body of Yoon Hee Moy with the knife in her hand. Isabella then ran away and was arrested the next day. During the court proceedings, it came out that Isabella suffered from schizophrenia and delusions. She didn't think that her mother was her real mother, but a stranger named Cecilia. She also thought by killing the mysterious Cecilia stranger, she would be saving the world. Maybe in the end, she wasn't evil at all and was just completely insane. Either way, Isabella says she's ready to rejoin society. What do you think? Should she be allowed to walk the streets as a free woman again? Number 6. Sierra Halth. A teen couple has been charged with murdering a man in Las Vegas. The teenage girl, just 16, and her 18-year-old boyfriend were arrested in Salt Lake City and are being extradited back to Nevada to face the charges. The couple, Sierra Halth and Aaron Guerrero, killed Daniel Halth and then burned his body in his own garage before running away. Daniel was Sierra's father, but he didn't approve of the relationship she was having with her older boyfriend. Daniel had even reached out to the parents of Aaron Guerrero, who agreed that the teens should not be dating each other. Each was forbidden to see the other, but we all know how that turned out. Investigators believe the original plan was to rob their parents and then run off to Los Angeles together, but something went wrong at the Halth house. Investigators found a huge burn area in the living room, as well as pools of blood. They also discovered a chainsaw and a handsaw, both covered in blood and human tissue, suggesting that the teens had tried to cut up the body to dispose of it, but they either couldn't figure it out or got too grossed out by all the blood. Finally, they resorted to burning the body in the garage instead. What do you think should have been the punishment for this kind of evil crime? Let us know your judgments in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already. Number 5. Heather Mack. Heather Mack is the sick and evil woman who just spent 7 years in a Bali jail for participating in the murder of her mother. She was originally jailed in 2015 along with her boyfriend for killing her mother and then stuffing her dead body into a suitcase. This was a pretty high-profile murder case. These weren't just a few greasy backpackers who got drunk and murdered somebody. Heather belonged to a very wealthy family, with her father being a jazz and classical composer and her mother being a Chicago socialite. They lived in the best and most upscale Chicago suburb. You don't really expect these rich people to commit murder and stuff a human body into a suitcase. According to what Heather told the New York Post, her anger towards her mom all started when her father died in 2006 in Greece. The three of them had been vacationing near Athens when her dad passed away, but instead of going home to do proper mourning or to have a funeral, Heather's mother insisted that they just continue on their vacation like nothing ever happened. Then in 2014, Heather started dating a guy named Tommy, 3 years older and an unemployed aspiring rapper. Things went downhill from there. Heather started skipping school. She started stealing her mother's credit card, and she soon dropped out of high school altogether and got pregnant. Her mom had taken her on vacation to Bali in hopes of persuading her to have an abortion. But this got Heather and Tommy so mad that they teamed up, beat the woman to death, stuffed her corpse into a suitcase, and were busted just a few hours later. Number 4. Yuvika Reddy. Yuvika Reddy was a pretty bad daughter. She actually killed her mother because she wanted to marry her own stepfather. And no, this isn't a story from some backwater town in the deep south. It's from India. According to local police investigators, Yuvika and her mother's second husband had fallen in love with each other. They wanted to get married, so together, they hatched a conspiracy to get rid of the woman standing between them. It helped that the woman in this case was extremely rich. Archana Reddy was wealthy enough that if she had been taken out discreetly, The money she left behind could have afforded her daughter and her husband a lavish life for at least the next decade. But the lovebirds made some serious mistakes. They couldn't help themselves and eventually got caught by Arcana, who immediately filed a case against her husband and threatened to cut her daughter from all and any inheritance. This caused the couple to panic. They acted quickly and without any discretion, but of course, they didn't do the murder themselves. They hired a gang of men to drag Arcana Reddy out of her car in the middle of the night and then beat her to death on the side of the street. The police cracked the case though, arresting all 7 people involved in the beating, as well as the vindictive daughter and the cheating husband. Number 3. Swimming with dolphins. If you need a bit of a break from all the beatings and the stabbings, let's take a look at a couple of young girls from Utah who stole their parents' car so they could drive to California and swim with the dolphins. These girls aren't inherently evil, just extremely misbehaved. What's really crazy is that the girls were only 9 and 4 when they stole the car and went on their grand adventure. They put their seatbelts on, got on the road to California, sideswiped a car, then crashed straight into a semi-truck. Thankfully, neither girl was injured. In fact, nobody was injured during the reckless joyride. The 2 girls stole the keys to the family Malibu, snuck out of the basement, and managed to get 10 miles along Utah's Route 201 expressway before finally crashing into the semi-truck. When questioned by police, the girls admitted that they had planned the whole thing and woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning in hopes they could make it to California by sunrise to swim with the dolphins. Number 2. Late night visit. This next listing is actually about a daughter's evil boyfriend. In Louisiana, a father was killed by a 17-year-old boy with a ladder. He also had a gun, which he used to shoot 35-year-old Desmond Hamilton. But the ladder was important as well. It was extremely early in the morning on a Sunday when Desmond realized that there was a ladder leaning against his house, with the top of it perched in his daughter's window. Naturally, Desmond was upset. The girl's mother and grandmother took her into another room, while the father tried to bring the teenage boy downstairs and have a civil conversation with him. Instead, the boy wanted to argue. The argument turned violent, and the 2 men started shooting at each other. Not only was the 17-year-old armed and dangerous, so too was the father. Authorities have no idea which one shot first, but Desmond ended up being the one taken to the hospital and pronounced dead. The teenager was also injured, but he's expected to make a full recovery. Of course, he's being charged with second-degree murder, so he'll be sent straight to jail, but he's still alive. But here comes the part about the evil daughter. The girl had invited the boy into the house, and it wasn't the first time it had happened. According to the Zachary Police Department, this was an ongoing issue with the daughter inviting the boy into the house over and over again. Even though she didn't technically kill her father, her sneaking the boy in with the ladder repeatedly and against the wishes of her family is what led to the shooting. And number 1, Erica Nicole McDonald. In Houston, Texas, a 29-year-old woman broke into her mother's house through a window and then attacked her with a knife. Her name is Erica Nicole McDonald, and she's one of the worst daughters ever. At about 9 o'clock at night, Erica snuck onto her mother's property on Willow Place Drive, smashed the window, crawled into the house, and then stabbed 51-year-old Terry Mendoza, as well as her 63-year-old aunt, who just so happens to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. According to local police, Erica's motive came from an argument the 2 had gotten into prior to the attack. She was angry enough to stab her mother to death. Although in her defense, she did try performing CPR for a few moments before getting freaked out and running away. But she must have known that she wasn't going to get away with what happened, and she turned up later to the apartment and gave herself up to the investigators. Her mother died from the stab wounds at the hospital, while her aunt required surgery for 6 deep punctures that she suffered during the altercation. Relatives had actually tried to get officers to apprehend Erica before things went bad. Not only was she a rather evil daughter, she was also a pretty bad mother. The police responded to a welfare call just 6 hours before the attack, in which they threatened to charge Erica with child endangerment. Erica was so mad that, well, she stabbed her mom for getting police involved in her business.
10. Real-life Subway Surfers. Have you ever played the game Subway Surfer? Well, here's a man who set out to play the game in real life with devastating consequences. In October of 2021, a man in New York died while attempting to surf the subway. The 32-year-old man, whose name was not revealed, was struck by a northbound train after losing his balance while surfing on top of the moving J train on an early Saturday morning. In an interview, the police said that the incident happened around 4:30 a.m. after the victim stood on top of the train's roof, which was headed towards the Williamsburg Bridge from the Essex Street station. They added that the victim slipped from the subway roof and landed on the northbound side of the tracks, where he was run over by another oncoming train. The man was pronounced dead at the scene. After the incident, the MTA temporarily suspended its service by cutting off the power. Several hours later, the service resumed. In 2019, a similar incident happened when a 14-year-old boy died after riding on top of a train which was on the way to Manhattan. The incident occurred on a Saturday night around 9 p.m. on the track near Queensboro Plaza. Several such incidents have been reported where youngsters wanted to put their gaming skills into real-life action. Clearly, from these examples, we can see they failed miserably. 9. Drop dead. We all know how teenagers can be reckless, but sometimes they take their recklessness to unimaginable levels. A teenage boy from Paris in 2017 was killed while he was attempting to train surf over an iconic bridge. The boy, who was all of 16 at the time, attempted the stunt on the roof of a train that was crossing the Bir Hakeim Bridge. Witnesses at the scene said the boy was hit by the roof when he was trying to pull off the stunt. The boy fell onto the tracks and died on the spot. One of the witnesses, who was a British tourist, said that when the train started to leave, the boy sat and turned his back on a low bridge that was approaching. He even smiled at everyone present on the platform. People were screaming, and moments later the teen's head hit the bridge and he was then thrown from the train. The witness even said that there was a terrible thud sound when the victim hit the metal surface. The whole scenario was terrifying. The teenager's identification was not made public. The victim's face was disfigured and mutilated as a result of the fatal accident. One of the onlookers was taken to the hospital after being psychologically distressed by the incident. In CCTV footage, it was shown that the boy arrived at the station with his two friends, who fled the scene. Neither the emergency services nor the police were able to find them. Hopefully, this situation serves as a lesson to everyone who loves seeking thrills in the most dangerous ways possible. 8. Skullbreaker. Train surfing has unfortunately become a popular stunt for many thrill seekers. However, these amateur seekers still don't understand how much they are at risk while performing these stunts. In 2013, a young man died in an attempt to surf on the roof of a Paris metro train. The man in his 20s was accompanied by his friend, with whom he boarded a train in the Paris metro, Denfert Rochereau, around 10 p.m. that night. One of the men during the journey climbed up onto the roof of the front carriage. Just when he lifted himself up, he was struck full in the head when the train entered a tunnel before Montparnasse station. He died almost instantly, and his friend was taken to the hospital due to shock. A young Scottish woman who witnessed this gruesome incident said that she heard a thud sound at the entrance to the station. She then saw the body of a man fall into the space between the first and second cars. Everyone around her started screaming. She also said that she conducted CPR on him until firefighters arrived, and that the man clearly had fractured his skull. The police found a camera, believing that the men wanted to film the stunt and post it online. This was remarkably similar to an incident in Russia back in 2011, where two young students died while performing the same action in the Moscow metro. It seems, despite the reports of how deadly these attempts are, some people still don't value their life enough to skip attempts at surfing the rails. 7. Dream Snatcher. For years, many people have filmed themselves doing unbelievable things. Some of these ideas make us question their sanity. In 2014, Jordan Porter, a well-known street artist and 26-year-old man from Australia, died after getting electrocuted while train surfing after stripping naked. The stunt was filmed by his friends. His body was lowered from the roof of the Sandringham Line train at Balaclava after wrapping it in a gray bag. Passengers in the train told the police that Jordan had stripped before climbing up to the roof. One of the witnesses, Darcy Zelenko, and his girlfriend say they saw smoke coming out seconds after the man climbed up. After that, they smelt something burning. Darcy also said that some people were laughing while Jordan was stripping, but no one expected it to turn into a nightmare. A woman in the train contacted the driver through the emergency intercom after Jordan climbed on the roof, and seconds later the doors were opened. All the passengers were being guided onto the platform at Balaclava station. The emergency workers could not get his body until the power to the overhead cables was switched off. Lee Thompson said that the workers used harnesses to climb the train. President Tony Morton of the Public Transport Users Association said that they should do what they can and prevent actions that might cause death. Jordan was a street artist, and many of his fans paid tribute to him. Do you think a few government restrictions can prevent a bunch of stunt seekers from acting recklessly? Let us know in the comments below. 6. Two lost souls. Two men were found dead on railway tracks in between Hackney and Stratford tracks in 2019. A 25-year-old from Wales and a 27-year-old from London both got electrocuted and possibly were train surfing. Both of the bodies were discovered at different times and locations. One body was found around 1 a.m. on the tracks near Wallace Road, Hackney Wick, and the other was found at 2:30 a.m. on the line near Carpenter's Field, Stratford. A spokesperson from British Transport Police said that both the men died after sustaining serious electrical burns. In one of the interviews, Detective Sergeant David Taylor, British Transport Police, said that their officers have worked throughout the night to understand what happened. The initially gathered evidence suggested that both men were on top of a moving train and came in contact with overhead power lines. The police were wondering if the men were train surfers or graffiti artists. Joseph Alchin, a novelist, said that he heard a loud explosion and saw a fire on the tracks from his window. He said that fire was igniting underneath the train and thought someone might have thrown something burning onto the tracks. There were no witnesses of either of the men climbing the top of the train, but the police were still hopeful for more information or witness accounts, as it would have been a big help to them with the investigation. What are your thoughts about these thrill seekers? Is train surfing harmless fun or a dangerous idea? Let us know in the comments section, and if you're enjoying this video, then give us a like and a share. Now let's move on to some more spine-chilling train surfing stories. 5. Parkour. Parkour, for those who don't know, is a popular stunt activity that includes jumping, running, leaping, and flipping from building to building, along walls, and other structures without assistance from nets or ropes. A 19-year-old high schooler from South Africa died while performing daredevil parkour moves on a moving train in 2015. He was on his way to school when his train surfing resulted in a horrifying death. The young man fell off the tracks, where his head was ultimately severed under the wheels. Robert Malodzi, a spokesperson from Johannesburg Emergency Management Services, said that the boy was jumping in and out of the train when he suddenly slipped and fell and landed between the platform and the train. The incident happened on the tracks of Chiawilo railway station in Gauteng, Johannesburg, and he suffered multiple injuries. The spokesman went on to say that the victim was not the only one doing train surfing at the time, and that he was with a group of boys who were surfing along with him. Unfortunately, he was the one whose playful stunt ended violently. The authorities over the years have been dealing with train surfing problems, as this stunt has become a favorite pastime among the youth in the area. There have been incidents where kids compete with each other. Some surf on top of the roofs by risking their lives and not caring about the high-voltage power lines overhead. Robert even talked about another incident where another schoolchild in Mayfair passed away while train surfing. This has become a trend, and they are urging people to refrain from attempting this incredibly dangerous pseudo-sport. 4. Actor and daredevil. The chances of surviving a train surfing accident are low. In spite of this, however, daredevils, aspiring YouTubers, and others haven't stopped performing these stunts that might take their lives. Brian McKellen, a model and actor, lost his life after catching fire when he was electrocuted while train surfing in New York in 2014. The 21-year-old was rushed to the hospital where he fought for his life, but unfortunately he didn't survive. The authorities at Metropolitan Transportation confirmed the death of Brian, who died as a result of his severe burn injuries. They stated that burns were a result of getting electrocuted by a 12,500-volt overhead power line. One of the crew members used a fire extinguisher to douse the fire, but his body had suffered nearly 85% burns already. The police said that they found videos of him climbing the train. Brian, who lived near Union Square, somehow got on top of the train at the Stamford station. Brian Colby, who was Brian's agent, said that Brian had big dreams of becoming an actor and model. He was about to work on 3 different projects, which included a thriller movie starring Pierce Brosnan. He went on to say that Brian was still learning to balance the responsibilities of adulthood. Still, he was also a daredevil like many young men. His mother was able to see him for the last time, and Brian's roommate was with him up until her arrival. Brian's dreams for success were ultimately ended after this unfortunate and tragic result of his choice to attempt the dangerous stunt. 3. Extreme adventure. Alina, a 21-year-old Russian woman, was a train surfer who loved doing daredevil acts. In 2019, while she was train surfing, however, she was electrocuted and killed after getting a jolting shock from a 10,000-volt power line. It is reported that Alina slipped on the train roof, and while trying to save herself from falling, she grabbed the high-voltage power line. After falling from the train, she was alive but died before an ambulance arrived. One of her friends said that she was a big fan of extreme adventures and that Alina also used to love base jumping. She even enjoyed scaling tall buildings. Another friend of hers said that she used to love speed, and that if not for this incident, then she could have died losing control over her KTM bike. A male friend was also there with her, and luckily for him, he survived the tragedy. Some of the locals reported that there was a crowd of train surfers who looked intoxicated while they rode on the train roof. The Russian investigative committee launched a criminal probe, and not much about the investigation has been made public. 2. The YouTube star. YouTube stars sometimes go to great lengths to impress their fans. Arkady Asanov, who is only 11 years old, lost both of his legs in January of 2021 after attempting to train surf in a bid to become a YouTube star. His limbs were severed after falling from a moving cargo train as the wheels ran over him. According to the boy's mother, Maria Petrova, her son was with 2 other kids aged 14 and 12 who ran away from the scene and left him there. She went public to spread awareness about the danger and the outcomes of the famous stunt among the younger generation. She said that Arkady's left leg was completely torn off up to his buttock, and his right leg was also lost, but the cut was lower. On her social media, she wrote that the 2 boys with him bullied her son to take part in the deadly activity. Thanks to a passing train, Arkady miraculously survived. Bulat Zakiv broke the rules and stopped the train engine to give him first aid and to prevent more blood loss. He even summoned emergency services for Arkady. Maria said that the boys who study in the same school as her son have pushed him to make a video while surfing a train, telling him that it will make him famous as he was trying to be a YouTuber. The older boy is known to be an experienced train surfer who has his own YouTube channel. Do you think the 2 boys should be punished for running away after Arkady was injured? Let us know in the comments. 1. The hanging stunt. Train surfing is illegal, but still, as you can tell from this video, there are still plenty of people willing to make attempts at it. If caught, serious action is taken against them, and they may even have to pay a hefty fine. With death, injury, and even arrest as possible outcomes, you'd think that may slow some of these aspiring stuntmen down. But no. Kalyan, a 20-year-old man and ambulance driver, died while performing train surfing in India in 2019. The man hit a pole while he was leaning outside by holding the rod inside of the train. In another incident, a teenager was doing the same kind of stunt, and he also died the same way. The Central GRP booked 17 people for performing these actions despite the railway authorities urging commuters to not perform this deadly stunt. In another case, a video of the same deadly stunt went viral. Dishat Nishad Khan, a 20-year-old who was on his way to shop for his cousin's wedding, decided to attempt to perform the trick. In the video, Dishat can be seen standing on the footboard, leaning outside of the train, and just in a few seconds, he gets hit by a pole, which throws him back to the compartment. The video was shot by his friend, Hussein Khan, who took him to a nearby hospital where he was declared dead. His father, Nishad Khan, urged the young generation not to perform such stunts and risk their lives. He wants young men to take safety and their lives more seriously. Several campaigns have been launched in the past to urge passengers to take train safety seriously. The local rail network of Mumbai is the busiest commuter train system in the world. The moral of the story in this video: skip the train surfing stunt.
What's worse, being treated like you're crazy when you know you're not, or having someone grossly underestimate your intelligence? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel.